Hi boys and girls, today is Monday and we are ready for our read aloud for this week, The Wild Robot Escapes. I hope everybody had a good weekend and they're ready to get busy again doing their online learning. I know Mrs. Williams is kind of sad because we're not going to go back to school this year, but don't worry, Mrs. Williams will come up with something so that we can get together as soon as that's safe to do. So I look forward to seeing everybody as soon as we can. We'll pick up with chapter 56, The Torch. Our friends were stuck in that tree. They sat in the upper branches, high above the wolves, trying to calculate an escape. Bright Bill could fly off whenever he liked, but Roz had to come down eventually, and when she did, the wolves would be ready. Shadow and Barb stretched out in the shade. They glanced around and licked their fur and sniffed the mountain air. The wolves looked comfortable, and yet there was tension between them. "I'm hungry," growled Barb. "I want to eat rabbits and deer, or maybe go back to farm country and prey on livestock. Anything is better than hunting a creature that can't be eaten." "You can eat all the animals you like," said Shadow, "after we kill the robot." Barb grumbled with frustration. She didn't understand Shadow's need for revenge, but for now she stayed loyal to her mate. Day turned to night and the wolves started yawning. Barb's eyelids became heavy. Shadow's body became weary. Then the soothing song of the crickets lulled them both to sleep. The sight of sleeping wolves reminded Roz of those long winter nights on the island, when wild animals crawled into her warm home and slept. She remembered the frightened look in their eyes as they saw fire for the first time, and this gave Roz an idea. Quietly, she broke off a dead branch from the tree trunk. Then she took the lighter from her tool belt and held a flame under the branch's knobby end until it was blazing, and then she dropped down to the ground. Shadow and Barb snapped awake to find the world bathed in orange light. Towering above them, looking like a demon, was the robot. Her eyes were glowing. Her mouth was roaring. In her hand was a torch, flames rippling, embers whirling into the air. The wolves had never seen fire. It was beautiful and it was terrible. Deep inside, they felt their wolf instincts telling them this ball of swirling light was dangerous. Their instincts told them to run for their lives, and when Roz lunged toward them, they ran. Barb yelped, Shadow whimpered, and the two wolves raced away from the fire just as fast as they could. Chapter 57, The Stones. At first light, Roz nudged Bright Bill awake, and the travelers continued north through the mountains. The goose stood on his mother's shoulder as she marched. His eyes darted around nervously, searching for any sign of the wolves, but the wolves were gone, and our friends turned their attention to a new problem. The weather out there was always changing. Roz and Bright Bill had seen many calm, sunny days suddenly turn to wind or fog or sleet or even snow. Our friends expected bad weather, so they hardly noticed when heavy rain came sweeping down a valley. But there was something odd about this rain. Bright Bill squinted at the oncoming storm and said, "Ma, why is the rain bouncing off the ground?" Bouncing rain? That didn't seem right. The robot's computer brain went to work and she found the correct word. "That is not rain," she said. "That is hail." Clang! A hailstone bounced off Roz's chest. Another one swooshed into the weeds. Then the sky opened up and hailstones were everywhere. They tore through leaves and branches. They ricocheted off rocks and roots. They flattened flowers and bushes. To the robot, the hailstones were annoying. To the goose, they were deadly. A stone hit Bright Bill's shoulder and he fell to the ground. Roz scooped him up, hunching over, protecting him from the falling stones. But the hailstorm might kill the poor bird if they couldn't find cover soon. Frantically, the robot scanned the area for any type of shelter. And there it was. On the far side of the valley, beside a winding river, was a cabin. It was old and shabby, but it had a roof, and that's what our friends needed most. Roz held her son close, pumped her legs, and thundered across the valley. Heavy hailstones hissed into the grass and squelched into the mud and clanged off our robot. There was a soft thump, and Bright Bill cried out in pain. Roz bounded over the rushing river in a single leap, landed without breaking stride, and kept running. Now she could hear hailstones cracking against the cabin louder and louder. The robot stomped up to the front door, turned the handle, and stepped inside. Here's Roz going up to the house, or the cabin. Chapter 58, The Cabin. The hailstorm was brief but violent. Its icy stones were quickly melting away, but the damage would linger on. The valley was littered with shredded leaves and wildflowers. Wounded animals were hobbling back to their homes. There we go. Several unlucky birds lay limp in the grass. Inside the cabin, Roz was standing by the window. She held Bright Bill in her arms, his bruised body wrapped in an old blanket. The robot knew everything there was to know about caring for animals, but all her son needed was time. His injuries would heal on their own. "Go on without me, Ma," said the goose in a weak voice. "I'll catch up to you when I'm feeling better." "That is ridiculous," said the robot. "What kind of mother would leave her injured son behind?" "But Ma—" "Stop talking," interrupted Roz. "You need to rest." Bright Bill tried to argue, but he was already falling asleep. The cabin was simple, just a square room with a wood stove, 2 chairs beside a table, and a couple of cots rotting in the corner. Dusty mugs and bowls sat on a shelf. Otherwise, the walls were bare. It was clear no humans had been there for a very long time. However, it seemed that some other creature had moved in. The whole place had a foul odor. Lumps of feces. Ooh, y'all look that word up if you need to know what that means. Well, lumps of feces were strewn about, and little footprints trailed away from a dark hole in the floor. I know my boys will figure out what that word means and let me know. Roz leaned over the hole, and in the language of the animals, she said, "Hello? Is anyone down there?" Something moved, and then a pair of shining eyes looked up from the darkness. "Who are you?" said a voice. "I didn't invite you into my home." "I am sorry to intrude," said the robot. "My son and I were only trying to escape the hailstorm." "Your son?" said the voice. "Is that him in your arms?" "Let me see." Very gently, the robot lifted a fold of cloth and revealed the sleeping goose. "He must take after his father," said the voice. "He is my adopted son," the robot explained. "My name is Roz, and this is Bright Bill." The shining eyes blinked, and the voice squeaked with excitement. "You're Roz and Bright Bill? The birds have been singing about you for months. You're living legends." "Technically, I am not living," said the robot. "You seem pretty alive to me," said the voice. "Either way, it's nice to meet you. They call me Sprinkles." With that, the creature crawled up through the hole in the floor, She was covered in black fur from her nose all the way to the tip of her fluffy tail. Well, except for those white stripes running down her back. You see, Sprinkles was a skunk. The robot took one look at her and stepped backward. Sprinkles frowned. You know, Roz, skunks only get stinky when we're nervous. Are you nervous now? Well, sort of, but in a good way. I'm honored to meet you. Please pull up a seat and tell me what brings you here. Sprinkles hopped onto the table and listened as Roz described their journey. The skunk was a very good listener. While Roz spoke, Sprinkles nodded politely and said things like, "Oh my," and "Is that right?" and "You don't say." This went on until Brightbill began to stir. "Ma, I'm thirsty," he whispered. "There's a creek right out back," said Sprinkles, "and those might be useful." She motioned to the bowls on the shelf. "Please help yourself to anything. My home is your home." It turns out skunks can be quite hospitable. Sprinkles invited the visitors to stay as long as they liked, and so our friends spent Brightbill's recovery in the cabin. The goose mostly slept. The robot brought him water and food. The skunk made sure they were both comfortable. A few mornings later, sunlight streamed in through the window and onto Brightbill. He was squawking and waddling and fluttering through the cabin. His injuries had healed and he was eager to continue their journey. "Thank you for everything, Sprinkles," the robot waved as she marched away from the cabin with her son on her shoulder. "Glad I could help," called the skunk. "Misunderstood creatures like us gotta look out for each other." And that's where we're going to stop today, boys and girls. We'll pick up with chapter 59 tomorrow, and it's called The Strange Wilderness. Okay, today's 365 Days of Wonder says, you have to listen carefully, this one's pretty deep. Do a deed of simple kindness, though its end you may not see, it may reach like widening ripples down a long eternity. So if you think you know what that means, why don't you send me an email and explain that? Let me read it one more time. Do a deed of simple kindness, though its end you may not see, it may reach like widening ripples down a long eternity. So if you can spell that out for Mrs. Williams and explain it, send me an email. Okay, and our joke for this week, or for today, is, it's an Earth Day joke because Wednesday is Earth Day. So if anybody knows any Earth Day jokes, send them to me. We're going to do one each day this week. Mrs. Williams will start today. How can you tell the ocean is friendly? How can you tell the ocean is friendly? It waves. I like that one, boys and girls. I am preparing a fun Earth Day activity that will be coming with your PowerPoint slides tomorrow and Wednesday, so be looking for that. I think that's all for today. If you have anything you want to tell Mrs. Williams, send me an email. Talk to you tomorrow.